So, following up on the videos on faster than warp travel that I've already done, this one is to look into the most ambiguous of the lot, velocities that many species seem to have achieved that exceed current Starfleet warp capabilities are often referred to as transwarp, regardless of how different the tech behind it may be. Because of this, these forms of propulsion are poorly understood by the Federation and all categorised under the umbrella term. First off, I need to clarify some things from my Borg Transwarp network video. That video was specifically aimed at the Borg Transwarp network and its potential for use in Starfleet. My mistake for saying in the opening that the network was required. It is required for the sort of superluminal travel to cross quadrants in hours, but when I said that trying to replicate a transwarp corridor without an established network nearly caused a core breach on the USS Voyager, I didn't mean to suggest that the same limit existed for the Borg. The Borg have been seen creating their own corridors at whim, and use them to traverse distances using the same technology that they utilise in their network. These corridors, once formed however, seem to exist for only some time after their creation, though may eventually degrade. In this way, the Borg have created their own form of faster-than-warp travel that does not rely on the network, though to achieve the speeds to cross the galaxy in short order they would still need to make use of their established conduits. In hindsight, I should have just included this in that video, as it has far more in common with the conduits than the next entries, even though they too are categorised as transwarp. So, this was achieved by generating a subspace field like the kind produced from standard warp. Then a tachyon emission was produced from the navigational deflector to force a corridor to form around the vessel and pull it into a state of transwarp. Time distortions were a possible side effect from this form of travel, especially for larger vessels, and precautions had to be taken to avoid these stresses, such as chronoton fields to maintain temporal consistency. The next species on the list to have achieved transwarp is the Voth, and they are one of the most advanced powers encountered by a Starfleet ship. They have been a spacefaring species for millennia, even at a gradual pace of development. They have a multitude of incredible technologies. Their chosen form of transwarp appears to be neither the formation of a transwarp corridor nor a slipstream drive, as it lacks the characteristic tunnels or streaks seen in these FTL drives. Instead, it most closely resembles the acceleration prior to the Warp 10 experiment as conducted by the Cochrane shuttlecraft. The methodology of their transwarp is unknown, and they're not likely to share, but they were able to cross 90 light years in a matter of seconds. This is the holy grail of transwarp technology, but there's little chance of the Federation obtaining such a device until they manage to develop it themselves. The Voth are notoriously insular. Not that Starfleet has never tried though. In 2284 through to 85, the USS Excelsior NX-2000 was the testbed for what was termed the Great Experiment of the era. It was a transwarp drive that was to replace conventional warp travel and was expected to outperform all previous warp drives. The experiment, however, was deemed a failure, and eventually the Excelsior overhauled to fit a standard warp core. That's as much about the drive as is known in canon, so the rest on the Great Experiment is from extra sources. The project was developed in collaboration with the Daystrom Institute, and in 2284 the initial test shuttle for the drive was lost along with its pilot, Torias Dax. It's also interesting to note that although the drive was deemed a failure, a warp-scale overhaul was implemented soon thereafter, suggesting that while the Excelsior may not have achieved the desired objective, at least some progress may have been made. According to technical manuals, this method of transwarp was to be accomplished by bringing the vessel out of phase with reality and thereby subjecting it to different universal laws, allowing for greater speeds. Either that, or it was simply a more optimal form of warp drive that required some further testing before it was implemented fleet-wide, and was finally ready for use in the 24th century, becoming a new standard. I think that whatever the nature of the experiments, they ascertained that warp travel in its current Starfleet iteration has an upper limit of 10 infinite velocity, and that they thought they were closing in on reaching that level, hence the rebalancing of the warp scale. One other race to have produced a faster than warp method of travel is actually among the first encountered by Starfleet, that of the Xindi and their subspace vortices. These were corridors similar to the Borg's transwarp conduits, as they were tunnels formed in a layer of accessible subspace. Using specialised drives, a phased deflector pulse was generated that would open a vortex into which the ship could pass. This was many times faster than the Starfleet warp drive at the time, crossing 6 light years in 2 minutes. As for why this technology was never adopted by Starfleet, and later the Federation, well, there are a couple of reasons we could look at. The technology was not theirs to play with, and the Xindi, although not adversaries by the end of 2154, had become more reclusive in order to deal with their own political and cultural turmoil from the loss of the Sphere Builders. However, the Enterprise NX-01 did manage to collect much data on the subject and even use the corridors itself. So unless they actually deleted it, Starfleet has the know-how to replicate it. So this leads me to Theory 2, that the Subspace Vortex technology was only operable within the realms of the Delphic Expanse, the region of warped and shifting spacetime where the Xindi dwelt. As the very laws of the universe were in flux in this region, it's possible that the vortice's existence was linked to the Expanse, and became inoperable with time as the Expanse dissipated. As they were able to deploy a probe to Earth from the Expanse, however, it's possible that once a vortex was opened, it was able to be exited beyond the realms of the Delphic Expanse, but not the other way around. As the Expanse took time to settle back into normal space, there would have been a window of time where the vortex was still openable but increasingly difficult, until one day the fabric of space was returned to normal without the sphere's influence. This would go on to provide another reason for the Xindi's absence in latter Trek continuity, as they had to develop another form of FTL travel to replace their now obsolete one, and they were already a warp-capable species alongside their vortex technology, so it's likely that the technology had stagnated after the discovery of vortex creation, and they had to play catch-up to reach galactic standards. So, these are some more examples of transwarp that Starfleet has encountered, and an evaluation on their potential use by the Federation. There's a lot of speculation here, as with the coaxial warp drive, there was no on-screen explanation as to why there was no further interest in the propulsion methods, only speculation. So thanks for watching this video on the less defined transwarp methods, and yeah, I should have just included the Borg's one with the prior video as it's basically the same tech. So until the next video, thanks for watching, I've been Rick, and goodbye.